And actually, it's three of us because we have very big shoes. I know, yes, it's all very spontaneous. So we also are really fortunate to have Jennifer Walther, who is the director of DEM for the city and county. Woo-hoo! Next slide, please. And I realized that should say Oahu Feeding Task Force. So we're going to do a little more of a focus dive, share a little bit about the framework and how it works, and then have a chance to talk about the different pieces, invite all of you to participate, and also kind of look at lessons learned, both from Oahu and other islands, and how we can kind of share and learn from each other. Next slide. But first, we wanted to start by building a little bit of context of where we're sort of already operating in blue sky. So I just wanted to give a quick update on the state of food insecurity in Hawaii from our recent report that just came out in November. Next slide. So this was just for a little context. This was taken in May and June of this year, looking back at the past 12 months. This is a follow-up to our 2023 study. And I'm just going to share a little bit today. And I think maybe we forgot to put a QR code, but we have copies outside and a QR code outside of the executive summary. But basic takeaway is that 1 in 3 households are food insecure, 32%. So this is in line with what we found in 2023, but it really reinforces that that's a real number, and it's a big, scary number, especially because of those 2/3 or 1 in 5 overall have very low food insecurity. That means they are hungry. They are skipping meals. They are going whole days without eating. In addition, we have 11% of households of all of those going whole days without food. Next slide, please. Particularly alarming was what we saw in terms of child food insecurity. These numbers, although they are in the margin of error, they were all trending in the same direction, and it's not in the direction we want to see. So we found 34% of children experienced food insecurity. That's up from 29%. And we found that 45% of adults in households with children experience food insecurity, and that is up from 38%. So these are, parents and caregivers who are skipping meals so that their kids getting eaten. In fact, we were talking with a gentleman who we helped sign up for SNAP back this summer, and he has 4 kids and he works and he gets SNAP, and it was the end of the month. So he hadn't eaten dinner the night before. So his kids could eat. And, he says he's doing intermittent fasting, so people don't know. But that's kind of the daily reality for nearly half of our parents and caregivers who have children in this state. Next slide, please. We were also able to look at these numbers by county. And so, again, you see these really alarming numbers across the board, but Hawaii Island, Maui, both over 40%. Kauai County matches the state number, 25% or 1 in 4 on Oahu, which, maybe in comparison seems better, but it's still 250,000 people. And again, 2/3 of those, and that's true on Oahu, have very low food security. So that's about 170,000 people on this island where we're all gathered right now who are hungry. Next slide, please. And then the other piece I want to mention is, so we have this 1 in 3 households are food insecure, and then about another 2 in 10 or 1 in 5 are only marginally food secure. So that means they are 1 to 2 paychecks from moving into that food insecure category. And we saw that during the federal shutdown, right? We saw federal employees that you traditionally think of as secure jobs. We saw those lines fill up. We saw that once people lose a paycheck or two, they can no longer afford to do all the different things, to pay their rent, to pay their utilities, to eat. And our state did an amazing job of stepping up and to fill those gaps. But these are, when we're talking, this is all, again, these are all blue sky numbers. This is before this data is before SNAP cuts, before the 2% reduction in SNAP, before the shutdown. So this is where we were in May or June. This isn't everything coming and what happens in the case of a disaster like we've been hearing about. Next slide, please. And then, yeah, disaster preparedness. Albie touched on this a little bit this morning, but 6% of our food insecure households are prepared. And similar, we also found similar numbers to Albie. We found 15% overall, but only 6% of food insecure households. Next slide. Um, so just a little bit about the food bank coolie. And this is important to understand sort of what, again, already exists in terms of the distribution framework, which sets the stage for us to be able to, again, respond during disasters. So altogether, we have, oh, things are moving. I don't know how that's happening. We have over 500 agency partners and pantries that we work with. We do mobile distribution. So we want to meet people where they are. And this network really allows us to do that, to have, to be all over all of the islands. And so, for example, last year, we together distributed enough food for over 29 million meals, including 10 million pounds of fresh produce. And all of the food banks are doing a lot of work to invest in these farm to family programs and other investments in local produce and local food wherever we can. Next slide. And then again, just zooming in, because this is about the Oahu Feeding Task Force, you can kind of see all those dots all over to understand all the places where we have partners, big or small. We, work with organizations like ʻŌlelo Social Services and the Pantry, which, we're getting them over 1 million pounds of food a year, to, tiny churches with who are maybe only distributing a few thousand pounds, but they all know people. We heard the Maui panel talk about community. And so that's what these agencies partners are. They are in the community. And they're the ones who are in these emergencies are going to know best how to make sure everybody gets fed. Next slide, please. Okay. So what is the Oahu Feeding Task Force? How did it come to be? What's the thinking behind it? So I'm going to turn that over to Jennifer to talk a little bit about that.
So, hi everyone. Again, my name is Jennifer Walter. I'm the Deputy Director at the Oahu Department of Emergency Management. And like you heard earlier today, what we really are is a coordinating agency. And we kind of bring together all the agencies that have stuff, that have subject matter expertise, and apply it to disasters, whether it's on the planning side or once something's happened on the response side. And feeding's always been a difficult thing to plan for us in emergency management, because when we look around our county agencies, it's clear there's the fire department. They have, search and rescue, hazmat response. Okay, we'll put it on them. There's folks who maintain the roads and the traffic lights. So if those go down in emergencies, that's the lead agency for that. But who's the lead agency for feeding in government? It's not something that we do every day. Who's the logistics support for it? It's not something you do every day. And it's really clear to us that the answer to this is really in the nonprofits and the private sector that make this happen every single day. And one of the challenges is when you start trying to talk to folks about that who already have a huge job like the food bank does, it's like, oh, an emergency? Well, we can help, but I don't know if we're the lead for that. And then COVID happened. And people who didn't see themselves as emergency responders before or involved in this kind of stuff were suddenly out there doing massive food distributions or tailoring their programs to meet people's needs for feeding in the context of an emergency, which isn't what we imagined, but that's what it was. And suddenly, I think in our county, at least, there's this momentum to try to memorialize some of that work that had happened and to figure out how to do this. And I'm really appreciative because Food Bank really raised their hand for us and said, we will help you for coordinating the feeding part. And I want to be real clear, that doesn't mean leading it and doing it all, but helping through their network and their other partnerships of bringing this together. And so we came together and started talking about what a feeding plan would look like. And over the years, I've seen a lot. Someone one time handed me one. They had, I think, taken it from Alaska and just cut and paste the Alaska abbreviation for Hawaiʻi. And there were these really thick plans with that would sit on a shelf and take forever to do. And so I would say our approach was kind of, so this was guided by a few things. And some of this is from our own perspective as an emergency management agency, but also there was agreement within our partners. One, we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. I remember talking to a guy from Walmart one day a few years ago, and he said, look, my job is to move boxes. In a disaster, just let me move boxes. And so that's how I view my agency's role in feeding. I just need to let these guys move boxes, right? And figure out what I can do to make them get back up and running again. And so really, we want to use what already exists. So if there's already a network of people doing food distributions every day, why recreate that? Why not figure out how to leverage that for disaster? But in the context, we realize there are people outside the food bank network that also need to be engaged, that have great capacity, and they were also invited into this. Because we didn't want it to be like, oh, phew, okay, that's off our plates, food bank, you've got it. We had to help them build a structure where during a disaster, there are hundreds of partners, it was manageable. And that's kind of what this task force is supposed to be. The next kind of thing was for me when any planning I approach, two things. Start at the start. So a lot of times there's a lot of different interests of people. How are we going to get the farmers to recover, or how are we going to cook hot meals? And I always kind of go to, okay, it's day one. If we can't answer those basic questions, and my question was day one, who do we get on the phone to start talking, a manageable number of people to have the conversation? And really, that's at heart what this task force is. These are the people who represent networks of other people involved in food, who are the ones we need to get on the phone and start the conversation. My background before government, I came from a nonprofit that existed because of its volunteers. So I really believe in community. But in the context of disaster, I also believe that there needs to be some sort of structure to organize all of that enthusiasm and purpose and intent, because as much as community voice needs to hear us, if everybody's talking at once or it's not reaching us a constructive way, we're a very small agency at the end of the day. And so we need manageable ways to get the input on what's going on out there. And that's a little bit about what this was supposed to do. So not only do we want to start at the start, our other goal is to just start. There have been so many efforts over the years to quantify how bad it's going to be. I don't care. It's going to be bad. Okay. That there's going to be a huge need. We've got to stop just defining the problem and actually come up with some solutions. And we didn't want to give ourselves a 200-page document that was going to take forever to produce and no one was going to read at the end of the day. We wanted something short, manageable, that was easy to update and keep living. And that's what we have a little bit. We needed to be flexible. A lot of planning efforts I've seen have been about the catastrophic disaster. And the minute you have a small flood that affects a single community, it falls apart because it wasn't designed to do that. And that's what I think this feeding task force is. It can do one shelter's open to the idea, 100 shelters open. It's supposed to grow with it. It's supposed to create efficiency, I think, for Foodbank and their partner network, but also by bringing others in who have large networks. Again, in an emergency operations center, we only have so many seats and so many people to give us that feedback of what's going on and what the needs are, how we help them move boxes. It's supposed to create that efficiency for us. And we also, I think, strive to build something that's realistic and sustainable. So really, I feel like all the agencies that have come together have made this kind of part of their emergency management culture. We've tried to keep it simple and executable for all of us, recognizing day-to-day constraints. And so we brought these groups together, and I'm going to let them go through the details about what we produced with this feeding task force. But kudos to Rona and the Food Bank for their support.
I'm going to just hold it. Thank you, Jennifer. Before I start, I wanted to say that I am a member of the board for the Hawaii Food Bank, and I am so impressed at their professionalism, their hard work, and really, as I got to know the members of the team, just their heart and passion for the work. They really care about the people that they serve and how they do their work. And I say this because I'm just so grateful that they allowed me to stand here and speak on behalf of Amy. The planning committee was awesome. They changed out the picture. They found my bio, and but really, these are Amy's words, and I'm just hoping that I can deliver them as well. So next slide. So the structure of the feeding task force is pretty simple. First, you must know that we met every month for about a year. And we've just decided to go to a quarterly meeting schedule and dig deeper into these sectors or focus areas. So the first area is, let's see. Well, first of all, we do report to Jennifer. She did a really, Jennifer and her team at the Department of Emergency Management. And we are really working to ensure that we can support the mass feeding needs on Oahu. And we hope to be able to scale up and or down depending on the disaster. And you see examples, or we've had examples of this, and might not be just a disaster; it could be an emergency. You know, we've seen what happened with the SNAP and just the federal shutdown. So the different sectors. First is the vulnerable populations. Sorry, and these are the liaisons. So the City and County Elderly Affairs Division is the liaison for vulnerable populations. The that's very small print. Private sector liaison is the Hawaii Food Industry Association. The VOA liaison is Lanakila Pacific and myself. Community liaison is Chef Hui. And then there are different various sectors. So, um, oh, I'm sorry, back to the other side, but we could stay there. So, shelter lead is the Salvation Army. Mass feeding is, of course, the Hawaii Food Bank. Operations and logistics, also Hawaii Food Bank, and regional logistics teams is really mass distribution partners. So, okay, next slide. So this slide really seeks to talk a little bit more about each of the sectors. So at the top there, private sector liaison, it represents all of our food industry folks and helps to secure, as they help to secure food, logistics support, etc. And so again, the Hawaii Food Industry Association is the lead here. And the food bank takes the role of the operations and logistics lead. So they will be identifying where the food is located, where it needs to go, and how it gets there. And we also know that it isn't something that you can do alone. So we need the food bank. Uh, and they've identified regional partners. So come next. And these are leads in the corporate sector who might take responsibility for the work in regional sectors of the island. The next mass distribution, of course, is Hawaii Food Bank. They'll be leveraging what they do every day under blue skies. It could be standing up pop-up distributions like we saw during COVID or the shutdown, and working with existing agencies. The shelter lead, which is the next group, we know that there'll be displaced people. We know that there might be a need for prepared meals. And that leaves an extra level of complexity. Different volumes of food, different types of food. You need kitchens to prepare the meals. We need transportation to get the meals to shelters. And so the Salvation Army, working closely with the American Red Cross, will manage this, and they have, a lot of practice doing that. For vulnerable populations, we're very fortunate that the City and County Elderly Affairs Division has stepped up to lead in this space. They understand the, particularly the elderly and disabled communities on Oahu, but it can also English proficiency. It could also include for pregnant or new mothers. Standing in line at the food bank is really, food pantries are really, really difficult if you have a baby with you or you're expecting and then carrying all that food home. So there's a lot to think about as we look at vulnerable populations. And we want to dig into that because we don't want to leave anyone behind. The community liaison, which is really important. So Amy wanted to stress that, every day there are groups in the community, and we've heard what happened on Maui, that are not just stepping up, they're already working. They're cooking food in kitchens. They're serving people. They know the community. And when there is a disaster, we again, meaning the food bank, lean on these folks to really make sure that the response is full. Let's see. Next is the VOA liaison, which is sort of in the center there. And again, uh, the community is going to respond. So this is the Phoebe Task Force is for Oahu. If it's an Oahu specific disaster or emergency, I'm I'm sure the neighbor islands will come to our aid. And not only the neighbor islands, we're talking about folks on the continent, we're talking about internationally. The response could be that large. And the Hawaii VOAD stands for Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster. Matt and the team meet monthly to coordinate these resources. And as they come in, we will need a liaison to work with that group and the volunteers and folks who are sending donations, not just regularly, just in real time, really. So there is a VOAB liaison. And finally, the disaster agency cohort. So I'm going to talk about this group a little more in the next slide. But it's 22 agencies on Oahu, and they've had special training been identified by the food bank. And this slide says it. Um, you can't see it because it's really small, but it's a group of both faith-based organizations, nonprofits, and of course, food bank partners that have gotten specific training. We also, and Lanakila Pacific is one of the organizations. They're each outfitted with a Starlink communication system, pallets of food and water, and HDRs. These are the humanitarian daily rations. So just really pre-positioned to be prepared to respond. The food bank has not just given us these resources, provided training, but also there's a follow-up. So, we test the Starlink. The group gets together to identify, any needs, and there's ongoing training. So it's really something that's live and continuing to grow and improve. Um, they're also working with Aloha Harvest and the Department of Education to get these humanitarian daily rations delivered and stored at 25 schools and which are potential shelter locations. Okay, next slide. Um, so this is not a timeline. It's really the objectives of the feeding task force, and I'm going to read them. So we really want to tell you coordinate pre-impact preparations to identify organizational needs, capability gaps, and resource requirements. And really, we've really talked about this. It's getting to know everyone on Oahu. All the groups are going to respond and really building relationships now. The second objective, maintain continued situational awareness and adjust activities accordingly. So, as I described, Food Bank is really helping to continuously train. We're meeting regularly, and the group is growing. And Elia will talk more about that. We're identifying anticipated immediate feeding needs, vulnerable populations, and best approaches for feeding in these situations. So again, there are lots of vulnerable populations for multiple reasons, and we want to make sure that we're doing the best we can to address those needs and not when we're all in chaos and trying to figure it out. We want to know ahead of time what the best practices are and start to work towards that. We want to ensure individual organizations take internal preparedness actions. So we all know that if we're not prepared, we're not going to be able to help others, right? Individually and as organizations. So Lanakila Pacific in particular, we've hardened our facilities. Everything's hooked up to generators. We are slowly getting more and more prepared. It's not easy. If you think you can turn the switch and be ready, it's not true. There are procedures, there's training, there's just hard things you need to do, like buy a generator. So we're all getting the organizations part of this task force prepared also.
We want to coordinate with the EOC and have a voice. So I believe there's a person who sits in the EOC from the task force and sends out the information pretty much in real time to all of us. And that person is Amy, and I really have to give her credit for that. She's great at providing all of the details and keeping everyone up to speed. And that's a huge, huge task, but important so that we're all on the same page and all working in the same direction as a disaster or the emergency situation unfolds. And finally, we want to consider planning and coordination needs for the transition to immediate and sustained feeding operations. So we know the initial impact happens, we can respond, but sometimes it's going to be years, it could even be decades. How do we sustain it? How do we keep ourselves healthy, as you've heard in the last presentation, and how to stay together, really. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Elia.
Thank you so much again, Rona and Jennifer, for stepping in very last minute. We really appreciate the flexibility. So I know we are very short on time, so we are going to cruise through this because your voices really matter. So, as we all know, it's going to take all of us. And so if you feel like your organization or you should be involved in this work and you're not, we really invite you in and we want to hear from you. And so actually, we can go forward. I'm going to just skip this slide because we are so short on time. So we are going to actually do the like rapid fire breakout groups. So actually keep going. So we're going to so Rona just described really briefly some of our groups, and we're going to take 4 of them: mass distributions, private sector and regional logistics, community liaison and food hubs, and vulnerable populations. And you'll see in the 4 corners of the room, mass distributions over there, vulnerable populations in the back. I think the regional logistics and private sector in the corner, and food hubs by the door. And we're going to ask you to very quickly, like we're talking, I think we call it like 7 minutes or something. I don't know, 10 minutes. We get 10 minutes. Okay. So you're going to go into whichever group speaks to you. And even though we're talking Oahu Task Force, we want sort of everybody's voices for sharing lessons learned. And think about it in the context of a disaster that resonates with you, whether, it's something like the Maui fires or even just the tsunami warning recently, lava flows, whatever makes sense. And think about, really the big picture is how do we work together to make sure everyone gets food in a disaster? But more specifically, thinking about what you've experienced, what were the successes and wins, what were the pitfalls and lessons learned, and where are the gaps and opportunities moving forward. And so we are going to do like a super quick report back. So maybe we really do only have 7 minutes. So we have time for the report back of 1 to 2 kind of key takeaways that we can share. So this is like safe speed walking to your corners. Don't be shy. Talk fast. What is it that Chad do? 1.5 speed. So we can get as much from you as possible in the next little bit of time. Is everybody ready? Okay, I'm just going to start. I think one of the things that we talked about definitely was a couple of things. Infrastructure when you're doing mass distributions, like if you're thinking about building space, to always think about what can happen in the future. So someone was saying like having good drive-through areas so that maybe you can use that space for distributions. Another thing was just to be hyper local, like when we're talking about communities and agencies within communities, that's why we have, we're starting to do these emergency cohorts with our hubs around the island with our agency partners, is because we know that they know their communities. The food bank, we don't want to come in and tell them what to do. We want them to tell us what their needs are so that we can support them as much as possible. Our agencies serve 365 days out of the year. They know what their community needs. So if they tell us what their needs are, we can go back to the VOC and say, hey, this is really what this community needs. It doesn't need more baby formula, it needs X, Y, and Z?
I guess I'm going to start with the gap. Someone brought up that, we're all going to be a vulnerable population at some point. So maybe not to otherize it, but for the context of this presentation, I'm sorry we didn't write it here, but notes. Talked a lot about outreach, starting conversations, and then you get the answers like things like gas cards, the ice cream aunties, but also to try to eliminate the shame culture, to lead with joy like that. And then you just have to be flexible. So disaster happens or issue happens and you just can't skip a beat. You need to be consistent. People may need to shift, and you can do that by building partnerships. Let's see. Sorry. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. This is for me. Okay. So we've had three, just really quickly, formalized needs assessments. So the private sector and government working together to share data about where communities are, who's in need, and not just kind of rely on those informal connections that we all have, because our community knowledge is of our community. It's not always of everybody else's community. Extra staff essential for disasters. During an emergency, we see, as Chad was explaining, that often private sector staff and employees become essential personnel. So making sure that that's accounted for in our planning, and that the private sector has the capability to keep those people on staff, that they have plans to keep people working and operational even in a disaster. And number one, I know we've all heard about this a lot today, but it is the big one: pre-contracts. Get contracts in place during blue skies so that everybody knows what's expected of them, and so that there's at least the opportunity for compensation for those who are making the donations and meeting the needs and the demands of their community in a disaster.
Aloha. So this group was the Community Liaisons and Food Hubs group. We had a lot of different suggestions, from comments on the tsunami, thinking about cold storage expansion, really farm integration, and then a lot of different comments about, like, people will show up at the fire station or people will show up at their community center. And I think the big takeaway is that people, if everything's shut off today, everybody has an idea of where they're going to go for help. And that idea is not necessarily lined up with where the resources will be going. So it's important for any groups that are in these food hub circles or in these community liaison circles to be having these conversations. So if somebody does show up at your doorstep for a resource that you do not offer, you can point them in the direction where it is offered. And if somebody shows up trying to drop off 3 truckloads of hulu and you're like, bro, we don't have a reefer for that, or a kitchen. So making sure that that ends up in the place where it is. There was a comment as well about the local plans and trainings for disaster and community groups. And I think an important thing to acknowledge is that you got to figure out how to put those trainings into the trainings people are already attending, because it's hard to get people to make space for specifically worst case scenario planning. Making sure that that makes its way into everything else that's going on, I think is an important step. So I think that was it.
Hallelujah, everyone. I know that was short and sweet. Thanks for getting up and moving around and participating. Mahalo to our presenters for sharing about Food Task Force, but Oahu. Okay, so in closing, mahalo, everyone. You've made it this far. Thank you for sticking around. I just want to share a little bit of closing statement, and then I want to call our youth to the front to close us out with your voice. So from government protocol to the power of the private sector to community-based tasteful innovation and frontline leadership, today's summit, at least for me, explored a vast landscape of challenges, opportunities, and relationality. To close us out today, I would like to call upon our hui of youth that have been listening and observing and soaking in all of what us adults are talking about and doing and moving and shaking with. And going off of that idea of hope followed by action, I'd like to call you, each of you up and share whatever your heart's desires. But what's one download that our next generation got from being with us today?
Okay, I'll pass it over to just say your name and where you're from. Wow.
Hello, everybody. My name is Elia, and I'm from Waikiki, Maui.
I was all there from Kakao.
Hi, I'm Maya, and I'm a senior at Oahu from Honolulu, or Mauna.
Hi everyone, I'm Mia Nishiguchi. I'm also a senior at Hawaiʻi High School in Fukumoto.
Hi everyone, I'm Jaden. I go to Maui High, currently a senior, and I live in Fukumoto.
Hello everyone, my name is Ariana Clark and I am to Nolan High School and I'm a sophomore from Oahu.
Hi, I'm a public health student at Hawaii Pacific University, and I graduated from McKinley High School.
We're from the Hawaii Food Council, so basically, what we are is a statewide youth-led council of high school students, public charter, and independent from across Hawaii. Our mission is to engage youth in policy and systems change efforts that lead to a just, equitable, and healthy local food system for Hawaii. What we do is policy advocacy, leadership development, community and educational outreach, and connecting youth with mentors and allies. And why we matter is because HYMC brings up fresh youth-driven perspectives into conversations about food security, climate resilience, and local agriculture, ensuring that the voices of younger generations are heard in shaping Hawaii's food policies and systems. A couple of things that I took from this meeting today was that it highlighted growing concerns about Hawaii's food security as climate change, about climate change increases risk to our island food system, with 30% of households food insecure and only 12% prepared for disaster. Leaders emphasize the need for more shelf-stable food, stronger local agriculture, and shared infrastructure, especially since a major storm could shut down the port of Honolulu and limit supplies to just 3 to 5 days. Also, state agencies, community partners, and organizations like Salvation Army and Civil Defense stress the importance of hyperlocal knowledge, coordinated response efforts, and support for community resilience. Attendees also explored wellness resources and emergency fleet options. A community-led effort that supported over 4,000 families across 14 sites showcased the power of collaboration between volunteers, civil defense, the Red Cross, and Feed Basket. The conversation reinforced the need to update outdated preparedness assumptions and shift towards strategic investment. Lastly, private industry partners also shared how their logistics capabilities, such as refrigerated fleets, air freight, and pre-positioned supplies, play a critical role in rapid disaster response. Overall, the meeting emphasized that Hawaii's resilience depends on a strong coordination across government, nonprofits, community groups, and local businesses.
Something I took out of this was definitely the emergency, like just how we handle everything. You know, like what Auntie always said over there. Nothing just Auntie time. You know, can just do nothing. You gotta get out. You gotta take action. Yeah, you know what I mean. And one thing that I took from this was the mindset. You know, before I was like, Oahu got Maui. You know, I could just chill, but nah, it's not like that. We gotta take action. We gotta do something about. Yeah, that's what's up, man.
Something that I took away was that how resilience is based on trust and relationships, and the importance of building communities, like the stories that were told about people coming in to get food in Lahaina, and how some people were very opposed to it and kind of didn't want to ask for help, and how you have to build communities in order to help.
Yeah, as I was going through today and tasting all the foods and hearing all these amazing presenters, I guess from a DOE perspective, our public school lunches didn't always look like how they did today, especially because of past legislation. So this year we're incorporating a lot more local foods, and currently in the DOE legislative package for 2026, they're looking to change the procurement to increase the amount of money that they have so we can get more students eating these local foods made by local farmers, supporting local businesses. And I guess it's just really the sense that of how far we've come and how important events like this is, but also how far we still need to go. But facilitating community and trust definitely helps us get so much farther than we thought we could.
Something I learned was about the emergency foods because this wasn't talked about in my household, and just being prepared for whenever something bad comes and like yeah.
For me, the takeaways of this event would probably be the food tasting and meeting a bunch of new people and getting to see a bunch of new organizations where they had different foods such as reconstituted or they just had ready to eat, which was very interesting in my opinion when I got to taste them. Thank you.
There's this concept called Anthropocene, and it means like the end of the world is gonna be caused by human beings. And from this conference, like I just joined the Hawaii Food Use Council, and usually it's only for high schoolers. But then I was bugging Kabika. I was like, "Hey, I'm a college student, but I wanna join." And then um, now I get to be on a team with like these faces who I never got to meet in person until today. We have online meetings, except for Ariana. I meet her in person every single month. But it's literally so cool how high schoolers like they're the ones. Even that Climate Future Forum we had last month, Climate Future Forum is an event to just show that the youth, even if the politicians, the adults, when they're making these policy decisions and they don't want to include the youth voices, the youth have to be there no matter what. Pull up a chair or stand at their table. Do whatever you have to do in order to make sure the youth voices are represented. So gently certainly to unproposing. We're all learning this. We're taking the time out of our day to attend this conference in order to learn things that like collaboration, communication, and a lot of the things the panel speakers saying was give yourself grace and also know you're doing a lot of work, but you also need to take time for yourself. And there's this model called heal to healers heal. And it just goes to show that everyone is important. We all have a part to play. I have a position within this council, which is an opportunity that I wouldn't have had if I had not asked for that opportunity. So asking others, um, asking questions to show that you're learning, because that's what being human is all about. It's about asking questions, growing your knowledge, and being the best human you can be, being the healed healers of this world. Thank you.
And is correct. We do this thing to learn from our older generations because we are the future generation and we want to make our Hawaii better for all of us in return, you know? So mahalo everybody for letting us come up here and share our voices with you.